My name is Jim Murphy. I'm the interim director over at Sunstone. I've been around about 2 months and have been brought in to make Sunstone a very viable, not-for-profit organization that is totally united in its interests and enthusiasm and fiscally solvent. So, to that end, I want to thank you all for registering today. Just for your information, all of the expenses associated with today's event have been covered by sponsors. So your contribution as far as your registration fees, 100% of those fees are going to go towards building the work of Sunstone and supporting the activities of other organizations. So that's kind of a new paradigm we're trying to create, is one where we're very fiscally solvent and can do great things in the community in which we all live. So on behalf of the Sunstone board, just want to thank you all for being here and quickly introduce the staff of Sunstone, most of whom I'm sure you already know these people, but the Director of Symposium and Membership, Mary Ellen Robertson, is here. Stephen Carter is the editor of Sunstone Magazine, and Lindsay Hansen Park is our Director of Marketing and Communications. So we've done a little bit of shuffling, some restructuring organizationally. We have a number of board members that will be joining us throughout the time we're together. But once again, just a special thanks to all of you for being here. This is going to be a great afternoon, a great time to grow. And I'd like to now turn the time over to Lindsay, who is our host event manager for this particular event. And she'll walk you through some of the logistics of the remainder of the program. But once again, thanks so much for being here.
Okay, I'll be quick because this is going to be practicing your sacrament meeting posture by sitting for a long time listening to speakers. So I'm Lindsay Hansen Park, and I helped organize this. So if you want to throw fruit at anyone, it's me. And I appreciate everyone being really patient with the check-in. I just want to say a big special thank you to the Community of Christ. As you know, we are using their church building. They have been so generous with us in allowing us to do that and using all their resources. And when I came to set up yesterday, they like out-Mormoned us because everything was already set up and they were like scrubbing the tables. So step it up, Mormons. We have something to prove. So I want to thank them, and I also want to thank some of our other sponsors. We have Michael J. Stevens, who gave us a generous donation, Jim and Jill Murphy, Geraldine Poole, and Feminist Mormon Housewives were also sponsoring the event. Signature Books, and Whitefields Educational Foundation. John Larson's out there. So we couldn't have done it without them, so we really appreciate that. And we're going to go ahead and get started. And for those who want the background on this conference, I'm really interested in helping facilitate a transition in faith no matter what direction it takes. And so I know that there have been movements to stay in the church or to try to make it work, and I just wanted to explore all the different varieties of ways that Mormons find themselves on the pathway of faith. I think faith is a very transitory journey. So that's why these look like tickets. I know my husband made fun of me. He said, like, oh, that's very Relief Society of you. But it's everything is just meant to empower you to move forward in your own journey. So again, thank you for coming. I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have, of course, Joanna Brooks. And I just have to brag for a minute because she cleaned out my refrigerator this morning. She's been on The Daily Show, and she's cleaned out my refrigerator. And she's going to be speaking to... Sorry. No. She was, like, cleaning out my refrigerator. I should have probably... Yeah. She's really going to come back after this. D. Jeff Burton, he writes the current column, Navigating the Borderlands, which is where we get the name. And so, as you all know, you have a copy of the magazine in front of you that you are welcome to keep that. We're calling that your in-flight magazine. So, the fun never stops at Sunstone. And then we have Timothy Weymann, who is a licensed clinical social worker. Did I get that right? Yeah. And he's fantastic. And he's going to talk about if you decide to leave the church, doing that in a healthy way. And then Phyllis Barber, who I'm sure needs no introduction as well. Her and Jonah Brooks are both big, huge names in Mormon studies and published some amazing books. So you are welcome to talk to them after the conference, but we're going to go ahead and get started.
Thank you for having me today. It is an honor to be here. You know, I will never forget the moment that I first allowed myself to doubt. Of course, I'd always had doubts before, quite serious ones, but I'd resisted them. I saw them as a moral failing. They caused me considerable distress. But one night about 5 years ago, in my kitchen, I offered them up. I dared to say out loud, to God and to myself, I don't know what any of this means. I don't know if you're there. I don't know if this is true. I don't know what the answers are. I had feared this moment for years and years and years. But when I finally faced my doubts, when I finally told the truth about what I was thinking and feeling, I had one of the most profound spiritual experiences of my life. I felt light. I felt peace. I felt joy. Now, I had no more answers than I'd had before, but somehow that was less important. I had my integrity. I had taken an important step toward naming my own truth and claiming my own path. And I see this as a profoundly important turning point in my life. In Mormon culture, many people perceive faith transitions as something quite negative. In fact, we go so far sometimes as to call them crises, because in many instances they're experienced as such. And to be certain, they come with their fair share of difficulty and heartache. But I want to spend a few moments today normalizing faith transitions. I want to put them in perspective, make it clear that unlike what our culture sometimes tells us, that to doubt and to shift our worldview is a loss of epic proportions, this shift is actually normal. It's natural. It's developmentally appropriate. And what's more, it's spiritually healthy. So if you're here this afternoon because you find yourself in the middle of a faith transition, I want to shift the narrative just a little bit and say, congratulations to you. It might be painful and difficult, as growth often is, but this is a season to be explored and celebrated despite the discomfort. You have embarked on a true journey. Welcome to it. There's a wonderful quote that has given me a lot of comfort during my own periods of spiritual growth. Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "I wouldn't give a fig for the simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give my life for the simplicity on the other side of complexity." Now that might sound kind of enigmatic, but I understand it to mean that there is power in moving from the stark simplicity of certainty and a black and white worldview through the complexity of struggle and nuance and doubt to another kind of simplicity that emerges on the other side. The complexity is an examination and a tearing apart of things you thought you knew. Its fundamental purpose is for you to become your own agent, to embrace your God-given responsibility as the ultimate arbiter of truth in your own life. It's the process by which you shift the locus of spiritual authority from external sources, such as parents, scriptures, and leaders, to an internal source, namely you and your own connection with the divine or God. And complete spiritual transformation cannot happen until you are willing to take responsibility for your own beliefs. Then you can rebuild it again in a way that is organic to you. And this might mean discarding things that you previously believed because you felt you were supposed to. It might mean embracing things you previously didn't believe because you felt they were forbidden. It always means coming face to face with inconsistencies in your beliefs and becoming aware of conflicts. And don't be afraid of this. It's the process. There's a model that's proven very useful to me. In his book, Stages of Faith, developmental psychologist Dr. James Fowler theorizes that spiritual development often follows other patterns of psychological development across a person's lifespan. And this is a process that has been documented across all faith transitions and backgrounds, not just Mormonism. I believe there's comfort in knowing that this journey is part of the larger human story and that we're all participating in our own way. As just a quick roadmap for the discussions and the conversations that we'll be having today, I want to briefly share the stages with you. And I confess that what I'm about to share with you I took from that fount of all reliable knowledge, Wikipedia. I've read the book too, but today we'll be talking a lot about getting through stage 4, what Holmes termed the complexity, something I'll show you in a moment. But I hope that this overview will be useful as a big picture concept that will give us a 20,000-foot view and understanding of what's happening so that we can begin to put it in context. I found that information like this can be instructive and comforting during some of the wandering in the dark. So just really quickly, there are some childhood stages, and first there's what's called stage 0, or primal or undifferentiated faith, and this usually takes place from about birth to 2 years old. And it's characterized by an early learning of the safety of the environment, whether it's warm or safe and secure versus hurt, or whether there's neglect or abuse. If consistent nurture is experienced, one will develop a sense of trust and safety in the universe and the divine. Conversely, negative experiences will cause one to distrust the universe and the divine. Transition to the next stage begins with the integration of thoughts and languages, which facilitates the use of symbols in speech and play. And then in stage 1, which is intuitive projective faith, which is typically experienced during ages 3 to 7. It's characterized by the psyche's unprotected exposure to the unconscious and marked by a relative fluidity of thought patterns. Religion is learned mainly through experiences, stories, images, and the people that one comes into contact with. In stage 2, or mythic literal faith, which occurs usually in school children, there is a strong belief in justice and in the reciprocity of the universe. Deities at this point are almost always anthropomorphic. And during this time, metaphors and symbolic language are often misunderstood and taken literally. Stage 3 is synthetic conventional faith, and it arises in adolescence and can continue on for many until adulthood. It's characterized by conformity to religious authority and the development of a personal identity. Any conflicts with one's beliefs are ignored at this stage due to fear of the threat of inconsistencies. Stage 4 is individuative reflective faith, and this sometimes arises in the mid-20s to late 30s, and these are ballpark ages, obviously, is a state of angst and struggle, and perhaps if we're in the throes of a faith transition, maybe the most acutely distressing part, this is probably where we are. The individual during this stage takes personal responsibility for one's own beliefs and feelings. And as one is able to reflect on one's own beliefs, there is an openness to a new complexity of faith. But this also increases the awareness of conflicts in one's belief, and so you spend a lot of time trying to resolve the conflicts. Stage 5 is called conjunctive faith and is associated sometimes with midlife crisis. And what it does is it acknowledges the paradox and transcendence relating reality behind the symbols of inherited systems. You resolve conflicts from previous stages by a complex understanding of a multidimensional, interdependent truth that cannot be explained by any particular system. And finally, stage 6 is universalizing faith, or what some might call enlightenment. The individual would treat any person with compassion as he or she views people as from a universal community and should be treated with universal principles of love and justice. Now, it's important to note that this is kind of an overview, and obviously